Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor, a dietitian, or a certified health professional. The information presented in this video is for informational and educational purposes only. It is a case study analysis of a public figure's documented experience. This presentation is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or before undertaking any new diet or fitness regimen. Your health is your responsibility. He lost 100 pounds. Let that sink in for a second. 100 pounds. That's the weight of an average 12-year-old boy, or 25 bricks, or a baby rhinoceros. And he did it without counting a single calorie, without a personal trainer yelling in his ear, and without ever stepping foot inside a CrossFit gym. He did it by unlocking a secret that's been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. A secret that most of the American diet industry, a $100 billion a year machine, desperately hopes you never figure out. The man's name is Xiaomanyc Smith, but you probably know him as Xiaomanyc, the viral polyglot YouTuber, who shocks people on the streets of New York by speaking their native language fluently. He's famous for learning languages. But his most incredible transformation, the one that millions have seen but few truly understand, has nothing to do with Mandarin or Yoruba. It's the transformation of his own body. He went from being clinically obese, weighing nearly 300 pounds, to being lean, healthy, and full of energy. And the story of how he did it is more fascinating and more useful to you than any diet book you will ever read. Because let's be honest, you've been on this hamster wheel before, haven't you? You've tried it all. The low carb, the no carb, the slow carb. You've done the keto flu, you've sipped the celery juice. You've downloaded the apps, bought the meal plans, and maybe even shelled out for that ridiculously expensive stationary bike that now serves as a high-tech coat rack. Every January 1st, you draw a line in the sand. This is the year, you tell yourself. You start strong, full of motivation. You eat salads while your coworkers eat pizza. You politely decline the birthday cake. You feel good for a week, maybe two. And then life happens. A stressful day at work. A family get-together. A moment of weakness. And that one little slip becomes a slide, and the slide becomes an avalanche, and before you know it, you're right back where you started, only now you've got an extra layer of guilt and failure to carry around. The problem isn't you. Let me repeat that. The problem is not you. It's not your lack of willpower or your genetics. The problem is the entire framework we've been sold. The American approach to weight loss is fundamentally broken. It's built on a foundation of restriction, deprivation, and self-punishment. It treats food as the enemy. It turns eating, one of life's greatest and most essential pleasures, into a mathematical equation of calories in versus calories out, a joyless exercise in data entry. It's a system designed to fail because it's a system that goes against basic human nature. What if there was another way? A way that didn't involve forbidden food lists or obsessive tracking? A way that allowed you to eat delicious, satisfying meals and still lose weight, consistently and permanently? That is the promise of what I'm calling the Xiaomanyc Method. And in this deep dive analysis, we are going to deconstruct his entire journey, piece by piece. We're not just going to look at before and after photos. We are going to reverse engineer the psychological, cultural, and behavioral shifts that allowed him to shed 100 pounds while falling in love with food, not in fear of it. This isn't about a magic pill or a quick fix. This is a case study in a profound mindset shift. Arya didn't go on a diet. He adopted a new culture. He literally learned to see, think, and eat like a different person. Through his journey of learning Mandarin and immersing himself in Chinese culture, he accidentally stumbled upon a philosophy of eating that is intuitive, sustainable, and incredibly effective. It's a philosophy that prioritizes balance over restriction, community over isolation, and satisfaction over deprivation. Over the course of this analysis, you are going to learn the core principles that drove his success. We'll break down concepts like the grandma test, a simple rule that instantly tells you whether a food is truly nourishing or just a product of industrial engineering. We'll explore the chopstick principle, a fascinating mechanical hack that fundamentally changes your relationship with pacing and portion size. We'll delve into the psychology of the communal plate and how sharing food, a practice common in many Eastern cultures, can naturally regulate your intake without you ever having to think about it. We'll even examine the powerful role of soup and hot tea, and why these simple ancient staples are non-negotiable pillars of his approach to staying lean. By the end of this presentation, you will have a complete, actionable framework. a new lens through which to view food and your own body. You'll understand why the question, "Is this food good or bad?" is the wrong question to ask. You'll learn how to listen to your body's signals of hunger and fullness, signals that have been drowned out by decades of processed foods and confusing diet advice. You will see how it's possible to lose weight without feeling like you're at war with yourself. Why him? Why is Xiaomanyc the perfect case study? 3 reasons. First, he documented everything. His entire journey is public, scattered across years of vlogs, interviews, and social media posts. We have the data. We can see the evolution in real time. Second, he's not a fitness guru. He's not selling you a supplement, a book, or a coaching program. His transformation was a personal project born out of necessity. He's a relatable, regular guy who found an answer. That makes his experience authentic and his methods trustworthy. And third, his story is the ultimate proof of concept. He didn't just lose the weight. He's kept it off for years effortlessly, while traveling the world and eating an incredible variety of foods. He didn't just find a diet. He found a new way of life. So where did it all begin? What was the single catalyst, the breaking point that forced a nearly 300-pound man who loved food to completely rethink everything he thought he knew about eating? It wasn't a scary diagnosis from a doctor. It wasn't a New Year's resolution. It wasn't a moment of inspiration he saw on TV. It was a single profoundly embarrassing moment in a crowded restaurant in the heart of Flushing, Queens. A moment so mortifying, it shattered his denial and set him on a path that would not only change his body, but the entire trajectory of his life and career. That one moment is the key to understanding everything that followed. And it's where our analysis begins. Psychologists call this a crystallization of discontent. It's a moment so sharp, so undeniable, that it cuts through the fog of self-deception we all live in. For years, Arya likely knew he was overweight. He saw it in the mirror, felt it in his clothes, heard it in his breathing. But those were all private, negotiable truths. He could look away from the mirror, buy bigger clothes, ignore the wheezing. Denial is a powerful anesthetic. But the theme park ride, that was different. It was a public verdict. It was an external system, a simple mechanical latch delivering an objective, non-negotiable judgment: you do not fit. This is the first and perhaps most critical element of the Xiaomanyc method. Even before the method itself existed, the catalyst must be stronger than the comfort of the status quo. For most people, the motivation to lose weight is a vague desire for better health, or to look better in a swimsuit. It's a nice to have. These motivations are weak. They crumble at the first sign of a pizza craving or a rainy day when you're supposed to go for a run. Arya's motivation was forged in the fire of public humiliation. It wasn't a nice to have. It was a never again. The pain of that moment became a deep, powerful, and most importantly sustainable source of fuel. He wasn't running towards a goal. He was running away from a memory. And that is a far, far more powerful motivator. So, what happens in the immediate aftermath of a moment like that? The common narrative, the one we see in movies, is an immediate, flawless transformation. The hero throws out all the junk food, buys a new tracksuit, and starts jogging in a triumphant montage. The reality is almost always messier. The first phase after hitting rock bottom is an action. It's assessment. But it's a very specific kind of assessment, one driven by a brutal new form of honesty. For the first time, Arya likely had to confront the unvarnished truth of his habits. Not just "I eat a little too much," but a forensic accounting of his daily life. Let's imagine what that looked like. It would mean calculating the true caloric cost of that quick fast food meal. It would mean acknowledging that the 2-liter bottle of soda wasn't a treat, but a daily staple. It would mean facing the reality that his portion sizes weren't just hearty. They were objectively double or triple what a person his size should consume. This phase is excruciating. It's an audit of your own failures. Most people can't stomach it. They feel the shame of the catalyst moment, but they recoil from the detailed self-examination required to understand why it happened. They skip the diagnosis and jump straight to the prescription, grabbing the first fad diet they see. This is why they fail. Arya, however, displayed a trait that would come to define his YouTube career: obsessive curiosity. He didn't just feel the shame. He started to dissect it. He turned his personal crisis into a research project. The central question shifted from, "Why did this happen to me?" to "How does this system, the human body, actually work?" He stopped seeing his body as a traitor and started seeing it as a machine he didn't understand. He didn't know the rules of the game he was playing, so he kept losing. The theme park incident wasn't a personal failure. It was a catastrophic system error. And to fix the system, he needed to read the manual. This is the second pillar of his pre-method, the transition from emotional reactor to objective analyst. He began to consume information not from men's health covers promising six-pack abs in 6 weeks, but likely from more scientific sources. He would have encountered the fundamental, inescapable law of thermodynamics. Calories in, calories out. This concept is brutally simple, yet endlessly complicated by the fitness industry. But at its core, it gave him a fixed point in a sea of confusing information. It was the mathematical foundation upon which everything else could be built. Once you understand that energy balance is the ultimate arbiter of weight loss or gain, the problem changes. It's no longer a moral failing, it's a math problem. And you can't solve a math problem without knowing the variables. So, he almost certainly began to track his intake. Not with guilt, but with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist. Every meal, every snack, every drink became a data point. This act of tracking is transformative. It removes the guesswork and the self-deception. You can no longer tell yourself you barely ate anything today, when the data clearly shows you consumed 4,000 calories. This data gathering phase would have revealed the true culprits. It's rarely one single thing. It's a constellation of deeply ingrained habits. For Arya, it was likely a combination of what researchers call hyperpalatable foods, engineered by food scientists to be irresistible, and a complete lack of structure. When there's no plan for what to eat, you default to what is easy, fast, and satisfying, which is almost always the worst possible choice. The data would have shown him the patterns: the late-night boredom eating, the reliance on delivery apps, the massive calorie bombs hidden in sauces and drinks. He was mapping his own prison, and only by seeing the layout of the walls could he plan his escape. But data alone is not enough. A spreadsheet full of calorie counts won't get you out of bed to exercise. He still needed to harness the raw emotional power of that initial catalyst. And here he did something brilliant. He established what we can call a keystone protocol. Instead of trying to change 20 habits at once, a guaranteed recipe for failure, he likely focused on conquering one single high-impact habit. What was it? We can only speculate, but the most likely candidate is liquid calories. Eliminating soda, juice, and sugary coffees is the single highest leverage first step anyone can take. It requires minimal willpower compared to, say, giving up pizza forever, but the caloric impact is massive. A single person can easily drink over 1,000 calories a day without even noticing or feeling full. By switching to water, black coffee, or diet soda, Arya could have created a significant calorie deficit overnight, without changing anything else about what he ate. This first victory is psychologically crucial. Proves the model works. It demonstrates that change is possible. It's a small win that builds momentum for the bigger battles ahead. By successfully executing this one simple rule, I will not drink my calories, he would have started to rebuild his self-efficacy. He was proving to himself that he could exercise control, that he wasn't a helpless victim of his own appetites. He was taking the first step from being a passenger in his own body to being the pilot. He had the earth-shattering motivation. He had the objective data from his self-audit. And now he had the proof of concept from his first successful protocol. He had stopped the bleeding. But stopping the bleeding is not the same as healing the wound. A single rule isn't enough to lose over 100 pounds and completely reshape your life. He needed a framework, a comprehensive system that could withstand cravings, social pressure, and the inevitable plateaus. He needed an entire operating system for his new life, not just one piece of software. So how did he build it? The answer is fascinating because the architecture he chose came not from the world of fitness, but from the very skill that would one day make him famous: the art of learning a foreign language. So what does learning Mandarin have to do with losing belly fat? What's the connection between mastering Japanese tones and mastering your own metabolism? On the surface, it seems absurd. One is a cognitive skill, an act of intellectual gymnastics. The other is a biological process, a physical transformation. But for Arya Smith, they were the exact same problem, just wearing different clothes. He realized that the principles required to become fluent in a complex language were identical to the principles required to become fluent in the language of your own body. And this single insight is what separates his success from the countless failures we see every day in the world of weight loss. Think about the traditional approach to dieting. It's treated like cramming for a final exam. You get a rigid meal plan, your study guide, and you follow it with white-knuckle discipline for 30, 60, or 90 days. You force-feed yourself information, chicken and broccoli, hoping that on exam day the scale will give you a passing grade. But what happens after the test? You pass, you celebrate, and you immediately forget everything you crammed. You revert to your old habits because you never actually learned the language. You just memorized a few phrases. Arya's approach was the opposite. He wasn't trying to cram for a test. He was aiming for fluency. He wanted to understand the grammar of nutrition and the vocabulary of his own body so deeply that making healthy choices would become as natural and unconscious as speaking his native tongue. The first principle he imported from language learning was the concept of immersion. When Arya wants to learn a language, he doesn't just sit in a classroom with a textbook. He goes to Flushing, Queens, or Sunset Park, Brooklyn. He surrounds himself with the language. He orders food, asks for directions, and has conversations, however clumsy at first. He makes the language the path of least resistance. He did the exact same thing with his diet. He redesigned his environment to create a state of nutritional immersion. This is a critical step most people skip. They rely on willpower. They try to have a tiny salad for dinner, while the pantry is screaming at them with Oreos and Doritos. That's like trying to learn Spanish while living in a house where everyone is shouting at you in English 24/7. It's a battle you are destined to lose because willpower is a finite resource. Arya understood this. So he changed the environment. He didn't just add healthy food to his apartment. He systematically removed the unhealthy food. The kitchen, once a minefield of temptation, became his immersive language school. When he was hungry, the only words available to him were healthy ones. Greek yogurt, lean proteins, fruits, vegetables. The unhealthy choice wasn't just discouraged, it was made impossible. He didn't have to say no to a cookie 10 times a day because the cookie wasn't there. He engineered his home so that his lazy default behaviors would automatically be healthy behaviors. This wasn't about discipline, it was about architecture. He built a system where he couldn't fail. The second principle is even more powerful, the 80-20 rule, or what linguists call focusing on high-frequency vocabulary. When you learn a new language, it's foolish to start by memorizing the names of every species of butterfly. It's a waste of time. Instead, you learn the 100 or 200 most common words, the pronouns, the common verbs, the essential connectors. These few words allow you to construct 80% of everyday conversation. Arya applied this Pareto principle directly to his fitness. The fitness industry thrives on complexity and obscurity. It wants you to believe you need to know the Latin names of every muscle and the optimal supplement timing down to the nanosecond. It's the equivalent of learning the word for chrysanthemum before you know how to say hello. Arya ignored all of it. He identified the high-frequency vocabulary of weight loss. What are the few key actions that deliver 80% of the results? He boiled it down to a handful of things. A consistent calorie deficit, adequate protein intake, daily movement in the form of walking, and prioritizing sleep. That's it. He didn't worry about carb cycling, intermittent fasting protocols, or exotic superfoods. He focused with relentless consistency on the handful of variables that mattered most. While everyone else was getting lost in the advanced grammar of biohacking, Arya was just drilling the basics day in and day out. He knew that fluency comes from mastering the fundamentals, not from knowing a few fancy, obscure words. This leads to the third and perhaps most psychologically profound principle: embracing imperfection. Watch any of Arya's language videos. What's one of the most charming things about them? He makes mistakes. He mispronounces words. His grammar is sometimes clunky, and he doesn't care. He laughs it off, gets corrected by a native speaker, and keeps talking. He understands that making mistakes isn't a failure. It's a necessary part of the learning process. It's feedback. Now, contrast that with the mindset of the average eater. What happens after one bad meal? One slice of pizza, one piece of birthday cake. For most, it's a catastrophe. They think, well, I've blown it. The whole day is ruined. I might as well eat the whole pizza and start again on Monday. This is the all-or-nothing mindset, and it is the single greatest killer of long-term progress. Arya's language learning brain simply didn't work that way. For him, eating a slice of pizza wasn't a moral failure. It was the nutritional equivalent of mispronouncing a word. It's a data point. You acknowledge it, you learn from it, and you say the next word correctly. You get right back on track with the very next meal. There was no starting over on Monday. There was only the next decision. This mindset shift from perfection to persistence is a superpower. It inoculates you against the guilt and shame that derails 99% of diets. By treating slip-ups as minor grammatical errors instead of catastrophic failures, he built a system that was resilient, flexible, and, most importantly, human. Finally, he applied the principle of spaced repetition. In language learning, this is the idea that you review information at increasing intervals to move it from your short-term to your long-term memory. It's why flashcard apps like Anki are so effective. You don't just see a word once. You see it again and again until it's burned into your brain. Arya's weight loss system was built on the same foundation. It wasn't about one heroic 2-hour workout at the gym. It was about the daily, repeated, almost boring habits. It was the 30-minute walk repeated every day. It was the high-protein breakfast repeated every morning. It was tracking his calories repeated every meal. Each individual action was small, almost insignificant, but like a word seen on a flashcard for the 100th time. The cumulative effect of these repeated actions was transformative. His body, like his brain, was learning a new language through consistent, spaced-out exposure. It was adapting. His metabolism was changing. His muscles were responding. He wasn't shocking the system with a brutal, unsustainable blitz. He was patiently teaching it, one rep at a time. This is the unsexy truth of all great achievements. It's not about the one moment of intense effort. It's about the thousands of small, consistent efforts that precede it. Arya didn't go on a diet and he didn't start a workout plan. He simply built a new identity through the patient, daily repetition of core behaviors, exactly like one learns a language. He wasn't just following a plan. He was becoming fluent. And this idea of fluency is the secret key that unlocks the entire puzzle of lasting change. Think about it. When you're fluent in a language, you don't consciously think about grammar rules or verb conjugations before you speak. The words just flow. It's an integrated part of who you are. You think in that language. You might even dream in it. This is precisely what happened to Arya. He stopped thinking about being healthy and simply was healthy. The daily walk wasn't a chore on a to-do list. It was as natural as breathing. Choosing a healthier meal wasn't a sacrifice. It was simply what a person like him does. He achieved a state of unconscious competence. This is the polar opposite of the traditional diet model, which is built on a foundation of conscious incompetence. On a diet, you are acutely, painfully aware of everything you can't do. Don't eat this. Don't drink that. Count this. Measure that. It requires constant, draining mental energy. You are perpetually translating from your native language of old habits into the foreign, clunky language of the diet. It's exhausting. And what happens when we get tired, stressed, or just have a bad day? We revert to our native tongue. We go back to what's easy, what's comfortable, what's automatic. The diet fails not because of a lack of willpower, but because it was never designed to become part of your identity in the first place. It was always a temporary, foreign set of rules imposed upon your life, not a new language learned from within. So, how did Arya start learning this new language of health? He didn't buy a textbook or enroll in an intense boot camp. He started with a single word. One core concept. For him, that word was walking. This wasn't just a random choice. This was the discovery of what experts call a keystone habit. The term was popularized by author Charles Duhigg in his groundbreaking book, The Power of Habit. A keystone habit is a single, specific routine that creates a positive ripple effect, unintentionally carrying over into other aspects of your life. It's the first domino in a long chain. You don't need to push over 100 dominoes. You just need to find the right one to tip, and the rest will follow. For Arya, walking was that first domino. It seems almost too simple, doesn't it? In a world of high-intensity interval training, complex macronutrient ratios, and biohacking, how could something as basic as walking be the catalyst for a 100-pound weight loss? Because the power of a keystone habit isn't in the habit itself, but in the chain reaction it ignites. Let's trace the likely cascade. Arya starts walking every day. At first, it's just about putting one foot in front of the other. But soon things begin to shift. The daily walk gives him a small but consistent sense of accomplishment. It's a win. Every single day, he is proving to himself that he can stick to something. This builds self-efficacy, the belief in his own ability to succeed. This newfound confidence is currency he can spend on other challenges. Next, the walk starts to change his relationship with his body. He's moving more, so he naturally gets thirstier. Maybe he starts drinking more water instead of soda, not because a diet plan told him to, but because his body is asking for it. The fresh air and light exercise begin to improve his mood and reduce his stress levels. When he's less stressed, he's less likely to engage in emotional eating. He's not white-knuckling his way through a craving. The craving itself starts to diminish because the underlying trigger, stress, is being managed. The walk also gives him energy. It's a paradox of exercise. You expend energy to gain more energy. As his energy levels rise throughout the day, he's less likely to reach for a sugary snack or a highly caffeinated drink for a quick, artificial boost. He has a stable, natural source of vitality. This increased energy might then lead him to think, you know what? Feel pretty good. Making a salad for lunch doesn't seem like such a monumental effort today. One good decision naturally begets another. The walk didn't just burn calories. It reshaped his entire internal environment, making healthier choices the easier, more logical option. This is the magic of the keystone habit. Arya didn't have to declare war on all his bad habits at once. He didn't need an Excel spreadsheet tracking 30 different lifestyle changes. He just had to focus on one thing, not missing his walk. That single point of focus created a positive feedback loop that slowly and organically crowded out the negative habits. It's like tending a garden. You don't get rid of weeds by yelling at them. You do it by consistently watering the flowers. Eventually, the flowers grow so strong and vibrant that they choke out the weeds, leaving no room for them to grow. Arya's daily walk was the water for his garden. This approach completely sidesteps the single biggest point of failure for most people, the all-or-nothing mindset. The traditional diet lives and dies by this mentality. The script goes like this. You start a super restrictive plan on Monday. You're perfect. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You feel like a champion. Then Thursday afternoon, a coworker brings in donuts for their birthday. You resist, but eventually you have one. And in that moment, your brain screams, failure. You've ruined it. The whole day is a wash. The whole week is a wash. Might as well eat 3 more donuts and start over again next Monday. We've all been there. This black and white thinking is a psychological trap. It creates a system so fragile that one tiny deviation causes a total collapse. But in Arya's model, the concept of failure is completely different. If he missed a walk one day because he was sick or the weather was terrible, what happened? Nothing. He didn't unravel. He didn't declare the entire endeavor a failure and go back to his old life. Why? Because his identity wasn't, I am a person who is on a perfect walking streak. His identity was becoming, I am a person who walks. So what does a person who walks do after they miss a day? They walk the next day. It's that simple. There is no falling off the wagon, because there is no wagon. There is only the path and you just take the next step. A misstep isn't a catastrophe. It's just part of the journey. When you're learning a language, you will mispronounce words. You will use the wrong tense. It's not failure, it's feedback. It's part of the learning process. This reframing is absolutely critical. It transforms weight loss from a pass/fail test into a practice. And a practice is something you can always come back to. There is no final exam. There is only today's practice. This relieves an immense amount of psychological pressure and makes the entire process sustainable over the long term. Arya wasn't aiming for perfection. He was aiming for consistency, and consistency will always beat short-term intensity. He was building a resilient system for living, not a fragile house of cards. And the foundation of that entire system was the simple, non-negotiable, identity-shaping act of his daily walk. This daily walk wasn't just about burning a few hundred calories. It was a declaration. Every single morning, rain or shine, tired or energized, he was casting a vote for a new identity. He was telling himself, I am the kind of person who shows up. I am the kind of person who takes care of his health. And when you start casting those votes day after day, the evidence starts to pile up. The new identity begins to feel less like an aspiration and more like a reality. This is the secret engine of transformation. It's not about finding some superhuman willpower. It's about building a new self-image, one small, consistent action at a time. The walk was the first domino. And once it fell, it created the momentum to topple the next, much larger domino. His relationship with food. Because think about it. If you've just spent an hour walking, investing in your health, proving to yourself that you are a disciplined person, are you more or less likely to immediately sabotage that effort with a 1,000-calorie fast food meal? You're far less likely. The walk created a psychological buffer. It changed the entire context of his day. His food choices were no longer happening in a vacuum. They were now happening in the shadow of that morning's achievement. This is how you change your diet without going on a diet. You change the person making the decisions. So let's break down the nutritional philosophy that emerged from this new identity. Because what Xiaomanyc did in the kitchen was just as pragmatic and sustainable as his approach to exercise. He didn't follow a fad. He didn't eliminate entire food groups. He didn't subscribe to keto, or paleo, or carnivore. He operated on a foundation of timeless, undeniable principles, but he applied them in a way that worked for a real modern human being. The first and most important principle is one that the fitness industry often complicates to sell you things: the law of thermodynamics. A calorie deficit. To lose fat, you must consume fewer calories than your body burns. Period. End of story. There is no magic pill, no special food, no secret workout that can defy this law. Ari understood this at a fundamental level. But knowing the law and being able to follow it are two vastly different things. Millions of people know they need to eat less, but they fail. Why? Because they focus only on the what, the calorie number, and not the how, the psychological strategy to achieve it without feeling miserable, deprived, and constantly hungry. This is where the Xiaomanyc method truly shines. He engineered his environment and his choices to make the calorie deficit feel almost effortless. And his primary tool for this was the second principle, the crowd-out method. Instead of focusing on restriction on all the things he couldn't eat, he focused on addition. He obsessed over adding specific, high-impact foods into his diet. His number one priority, protein. He made it his mission to consume a significant amount of protein with every single meal. We see him making protein shakes, eating lean meats, Greek yogurt, eggs. He knew that protein is the undisputed king of macronutrients for fat loss. It's the most satiating, meaning it keeps you feeling fuller for longer than carbs or fats. A high-protein breakfast can crush mid-morning cravings. A high-protein lunch can prevent that 3 p.m. slump that sends you running to the vending machine. Protein also has a higher thermic effect of food, meaning your body actually burns more calories just digesting it compared to other macros. And crucially, it helps preserve lean muscle mass while you're in a calorie deficit, ensuring you're primarily losing fat, not the muscle that keeps your metabolism humming. Alongside protein, he added fiber, primarily from fruits and vegetables. Fiber, like protein, is a satiety powerhouse. It slows digestion, stabilizes blood sugar, and physically fills up your stomach. And finally, he added water. He was constantly drinking water. Dehydration can often be mistaken for hunger, leading to needless snacking. By prioritizing these three things, protein, fiber, and water, he began to naturally crowd out the hyperpalatable, calorie-dense, nutrient-poor foods. There was simply less room and less desire for them. He wasn't telling himself, "I can't have the chips." He was so full and satisfied from his protein and veggie-packed lunch that the chips just didn't seem as appealing. It's a subtle but profound shift from a mindset of deprivation to one of abundance. You're not taking away, you're adding so much good stuff that the bad stuff gets squeezed out. The third principle was a masterclass in sustainability. The 80-20 rule applied with intelligence. Ari never aimed for perfection, because he knew perfection is the enemy of progress. He knew that a plan that doesn't allow for real life, for birthdays, for dinners with friends, for the occasional craving, is a plan that is destined to fail. So he built flexibility in from day one. Roughly 80% of the time, he was on point. He was eating his simple, high-protein, whole food meals. But the other 20% of the time, he gave himself grace. He ate the pizza. He had a meal out with his family. He enjoyed the foods he loved without an ounce of guilt. This is critical. So many diets fail because they create a toxic all-or-nothing mindset. You eat one bad thing, you feel like a failure, and you think, well, I've already ruined my diet for today. Might as well just eat whatever I want and start again tomorrow. That cycle is soul-crushing. Ari's approach completely sidesteps this trap. That pizza wasn't a failure. It was part of the plan. That 20% flexibility is the pressure release valve that makes the other 80% possible to maintain, not for a week or a month, but for a lifetime. It transforms the diet from a prison sentence into a conscious, flexible lifestyle. And that leads directly to the fourth and final nutritional principle, radical simplification. He did not have a gourmet, rotating menu of 30 different complex meals. He found a handful of simple, easy-to-make, high-protein meals that he genuinely enjoyed, and he repeated them over and over and over again. For breakfast, it was often eggs or a specific protein shake. For lunch, it might be a lean protein with a side of vegetables. He found what worked and he put it on autopilot. This is a strategy used by elite performers in every field. Why? Because it eliminates decision fatigue. Our willpower is a finite resource. Every small decision we make throughout the day, what to wear, which email to answer first, what to eat for lunch, depletes that resource. By making his core meals non-negotiable, pre-decided staples, he saved all of his mental energy for more important tasks, like his work, his language learning, and sticking to his plan when real temptations arose. He wasn't standing in front of an open fridge, hungry and tired, asking himself, "What should I eat?" The decision was already made. The system was in place. All he had to do was execute. This combination of a scientifically sound calorie deficit, achieved through the psychological ease of the crowd-out method, made sustainable by the 80-20 rule, and made effortless through simplification, was the nutritional engine that powered his 100-pound weight loss. He rebuilt his body by first changing his identity with a single daily walk, and then he nourished that new identity with a food philosophy that was as intelligent as it was simple. But changing what was on his plate and how much he moved his feet was only addressing the physical side of the equation. The real war, the one that determines long-term success or failure for everyone, was waged not in the kitchen or on the pavement, but in the 6 inches of space between his ears. And the strategies he used to win that internal war are what truly separates sustainable transformation from the endless, frustrating cycle of yo-yo dieting. The first and most critical strategy was a fundamental reframing of the entire process. He stopped treating weight loss like a battle of willpower and started treating it like a science experiment. Think about that for a second. In an experiment, there is no good or bad data. There is only data. A scientist doesn't get emotional if an experiment yields an unexpected result. They don't throw their hands up and declare themselves a failure. They look at the data, analyze the variables, and ask, "Okay, that didn't work as expected. Why? What can we adjust for the next trial?" This is precisely the mindset Xiaomanyc adopted. The number on the scale was no longer a judgment on his character or his worth. It was a data point. If he stepped on the scale and the number was higher than he wanted, the old mindset would have triggered a spiral of shame. "I failed. I'm useless. This is too hard. What's the point?" And that shame spiral almost always ends with comfort eating, sabotaging the very goal you're trying to achieve. It's a vicious, self-fulfilling prophecy. But with the scientist's mindset, the reaction was completely different. A higher number on the scale simply meant the hypothesis needed adjustment. The internal monologue changed from, "I'm a failure," to "interesting. I consumed X calories and did Y amount of activity, and the result was Z. Perhaps the sodium in that meal I had last night is causing some water retention. Or maybe my calorie estimate was off. Let's adjust a variable for today and see what the data says tomorrow." This shift from emotional drama to objective data is the psychological circuit breaker that stops the cycle of shame and self-sabotage before it can even begin. It insulated him from the daily fluctuations and emotional volatility that derail 99% of weight loss attempts. He was no longer riding the emotional roller coaster of dieting. He was in the control room, calmly observing the metrics and making calculated adjustments. This emotional detachment gave him the endurance to stay in the game long enough to see real, lasting results. But a new mindset needs a new identity to support it. This leads to the second and arguably most powerful psychological shift he made. He didn't just try to eat healthy or try to exercise. He fundamentally changed his identity. He stopped seeing himself as an overweight person trying to lose weight and started seeing himself as a healthy, athletic person. This isn't just wordplay. It's a complete reprogramming of the subconscious decision-making process. Most people approach change with the framework of, "I want to achieve X, so I must do Y." For example, "I want to lose 50 pounds, so I must force myself to go to the gym." The action feels like a chore, a punishment, something that goes against your very nature. It requires a constant, draining supply of willpower because you're fighting who you believe you are. Xiaomanyc flipped the script. He started with identity. The goal wasn't to lose weight. The goal was to be a person who is fit and healthy. Once you adopt that identity, your actions naturally start to align with it. When faced with a choice, the question in his mind was no longer, "Can I eat this donut on my diet?" It became, "What would a healthy person do in this situation?" The answer is almost always obvious, and making the right choice no longer feels like a sacrifice. Feels natural. Feels like you're simply acting in accordance with who you are. Going to the gym wasn't a punishment for being overweight. It was a confirmation of his identity as an athletic person. Eating a salad wasn't a deprivation. It was what a healthy person does to fuel their body. This identity shift is the ultimate life hack because it outsources decision-making to your desired future self. You're not just following a set of rules. You are embodying a new standard. He began to take pride in these actions, not because they were steps toward a distant goal, but because they were immediate proof of the person he was becoming right here, right now. Of course, an identity is only as strong as the environment that supports it. And this is where the third mental strategy comes into play. He became the architect of his own environment. He recognized that willpower is a finite, exhaustible resource. The most successful people on Earth don't have more willpower than the rest of us. They are just smarter about how they use it. They understand that the easiest way to win a battle is to avoid fighting it in the first place. So, Xiaomanyc systematically eliminated the need for willpower by designing an environment where the healthy choice was the easy choice, the path of least resistance. This started in his kitchen. He went through his pantry and his fridge and ruthlessly purged them of the hyper-palatable, processed junk foods that were designed to be irresistible. He understood a crucial truth. You can't eat what isn't there. The battle against the late-night ice cream craving isn't won at 10 p.m. when you're tired and your defenses are down. It's won once on a Sunday afternoon at the grocery store by simply not buying it. He engineered his surroundings for success. He pre-portioned healthy snacks and put them at eye level in the fridge. He laid out his gym clothes the night before so there was one less barrier, one less excuse between him and his morning workout. He pre-planned his meals for the week, which eliminated the daily decision fatigue of, what should I eat? A question that, when you're hungry and tired, often leads to the fastest, easiest, and least healthy option. He was building a fortress of good habits, brick by brick, making it harder to fail than to succeed. He wasn't relying on being strong every single moment of every single day. He was creating systems that made success the default outcome even on the days he felt weak. Finally, the fourth pillar of his mental reconstruction was how he redefined failure. In the typical diet, a single slip-up is a catastrophe. You eat a piece of pizza and your brain screams, "You've ruined it. The whole day is a wash. Might as well eat the entire pizza, order a side of wings, and start again on Monday." This all-or-nothing thinking is the silent killer of long-term progress. Xiaomanyc adopted an engineer's approach. When an engineer finds a bug in a piece of code, they don't delete the entire program and start from scratch. That would be insane. They isolate the bug, study it, understand why it happened, and then they fix it, making the overall program stronger and more resilient. He treated his slip-ups the same way. A moment of weakness wasn't a moral failing. It was a bug in his system that needed to be debugged. If he found himself overeating at a party, he didn't beat himself up. He got curious. He'd ask himself questions. Okay, what were the conditions that led to that outcome? Did I go to the party overly hungry? Was I feeling socially anxious? Was I not prepared with a strategy? Instead of guilt, he used analysis. The failure became a valuable learning opportunity. Maybe the solution was to have a healthy, protein-rich snack before the next social event. Maybe it was to have a non-alcoholic drink in his hand at all times. Maybe it was simply to give himself permission to have one planned indulgence without letting it cascade into a binge. By treating failures as feedback, he inoculated himself against the destructive power of guilt. Each mistake wasn't a reason to quit. It was a lesson that refined his approach, making his system more robust and anti-fragile over time. These four mental shifts, data over drama, identity over action, environment over willpower, and debugging over failure, formed the unshakable psychological foundation for his entire transformation. He had rewired his brain for success before he ever optimized a single meal or perfected a single exercise. With this new mental operating system installed, he was no longer fighting against himself. He was aligned, integrated, and ready to build the unshakable daily systems that would automate his success. And the very first system he perfected was centered around the most critical and most misunderstood habit of all: sleep. That's what many of you are probably thinking. And you're not wrong. Sleep is a superpower, a non-negotiable pillar of health that governs everything from hunger hormones to mental resilience. But it wasn't the first system he tackled. Others might guess hydration or meditation, also critical but not the first. No, the first system Xiaomanyc perfected was his relationship with food. Not a diet, not a meal plan, a system. An automated, decision-free, failure-proof operating system for fueling his body. And this is where his journey diverges from 99% of weight loss attempts that are doomed from the start. Most people approach food with a mindset of restriction and willpower. They download an app, buy a book, and declare war on their own cravings. They rely on a finite, easily depleted resource, decision-making energy, to navigate a minefield of temptations every single day. What should I have for breakfast? Is this healthy? How many calories are in that? Should I get the salad or the sandwich for lunch? What about dinner? My family wants pizza, but I know I shouldn't. It's a relentless barrage of choices. Each choice, no matter how small, drains your willpower battery. By the end of the day, that battery is dead, and the 10 p.m. pint of ice cream doesn't just feel tempting, it feels inevitable. You didn't fail because you were weak. You failed because your system was designed for you to fail. Xiaomanyc understood this on a primal level. He recognized that his biggest enemy wasn't the cookie. It was the decision about the cookie. His enemy wasn't the calorie. It was the cognitive load of counting the calories. So, he built a system with one primary objective: to eliminate decisions. He called it, internally, the monotony method. And it is brutally, beautifully simple. He decided he would eat the exact same thing for breakfast and lunch every single day, Monday through Friday. Not similar things. The exact same things. Now, I can already hear the objections. That's so boring. I could never do that. Where's the joy in eating? And that is precisely the point. He had to fundamentally break the psychological link between food and entertainment. For decades, food had been his primary source of comfort, novelty, and dopamine. It was his hobby, his crutch, his reward. This system was a declaration that food's job description was changing. Its new and only role was to be fuel. The joy, the excitement, the reward, that would have to come from somewhere else. It would come from the mirror. It would come from the scale. It would come from the feeling of boundless energy. He was trading short-term palate pleasure for a long-term, life-altering transformation. So what did this look like in practice? It was a masterpiece of simplicity. On Sunday, he would execute the entire system for the week in under 2 hours. Breakfast every single morning was a high-protein smoothie. 2 scoops of whey protein, a cup of unsweetened almond milk, a handful of spinach, which you can't taste but adds nutrients, a tablespoon of almond butter for healthy fats, and a half cup of frozen berries. He'd pre-portion the dry ingredients into 5 little bags. Every morning, he'd just dump 1 bag in the blender, add the liquids, and in 60 seconds, a perfectly balanced, 400-calorie, highly satiating meal was ready. Zero thought. Zero decisions. Lunch was just as automated. He would grill 10 chicken breasts on his George Foreman grill. He'd steam a massive bag of broccoli. He'd bake 5 sweet potatoes. He would then portion everything out into 5 Tupperware containers. Chicken, broccoli, sweet potato. Every single day. That was lunch. He'd grab one from the fridge on his way out the door in the morning. Again, zero decisions. He didn't have to wander the streets at noon, battling temptation and trying to decipher a restaurant menu. He already knew what he was having. The decision was made 4 days ago. This monotony did something profound to his psychology. First, it completely eliminated decision fatigue around food. The mental energy he used to spend agonizing over meals was now freed up. He could use that precious willpower to make sure he got to the gym, or to push through a tough craving in the evening. Second, it gave him effortless control over his calories. He knew, without tracking a single thing during the week, that his breakfast and lunch combined were about 900 calories of high-quality protein, complex carbs, and healthy fats. It was predictable. It was reliable. It was a mathematical certainty. The third and most powerful effect was that it rewired his brain. By eating for fuel instead of fun, he started to sever the emotional ties he had to food. Food was no longer the answer to boredom, stress, or sadness. It was just food. This created the space for him to develop healthier coping mechanisms. When he felt stressed, instead of reaching for a bag of chips, he might go for a walk, because food was no longer the default solution in his brain's code. Now, dinner was what he called the structured flexibility meal. He had a family. He couldn't just eat chicken and broccoli for dinner every night. But he applied a system of principles here, too. The rule was simple. Fill half his plate with non-starchy vegetables first. Then fill a quarter of his plate with a lean protein source. The final quarter could be a carb source like rice or pasta that the family was having. This simple plate-building algorithm allowed him to participate in family meals without derailing his progress. He wasn't eating a separate, special diet meal, which can create feelings of isolation. He was eating the same food as his family, just in different proportions. The system gave him a guardrail, a simple heuristic that made the right choice the easy choice. And what about the boredom? He saw it as a feature, not a bug. He viewed this period of his life as a training camp. Athletes eat monotonous diets all the time to achieve peak performance. He was an athlete in the sport of reclaiming his life. The boring food was his uniform. It was the price of admission to a new identity. And here's the secret. When you are truly hungry and you're getting incredible results, plain grilled chicken and broccoli starts to taste like the most delicious meal on earth. Because it's not just chicken anymore. It's progress. It's discipline. It's the taste of victory. This system wasn't about the specific foods he chose. He could have chosen fish and asparagus, or ground turkey and quinoa. The magic wasn't in the ingredients. It was in the automation. He made one set of good decisions on Sunday, and that single act cascaded into 10 perfect nutritional choices throughout the work week, all on autopilot. He had built a fortress against the thousands of tiny temptations and poor choices that used to bleed him dry. He turned food from his greatest liability into a controlled, predictable asset. With his nutrition automated, he had freed up an immense amount of mental energy and stabilized his blood sugar, giving him a steady foundation of physical energy he hadn't felt in years. He was no longer on a roller coaster of sugar highs and crashes. He was calm, focused, and in control. But he was about to discover that what he did with that newfound energy, how he chose to move his body, was governed by a lie. A lie that keeps millions of people spinning their wheels on a hamster wheel of failure, getting nowhere. He was about to learn that almost everything we believe about exercise for weight loss is wrong. The lie is simple, seductive, and deeply embedded in our culture. It's the idea that you can outrun your fork. It's the calories in, calories out model taken to a brutal, punishing extreme. It's the belief that if you just sweat enough, just run far enough, just suffer through one more spin class, the weight will magically melt away. This is the gospel of the fitness industry, preached from every gym and sold with every treadmill. And for Ari, it was a religion he practiced with devout, yet fruitless dedication. He would lace up his running shoes, his knees already aching in anticipation, and hit the pavement. 30 minutes. 45. An hour of punishing, breathless effort. He would return home drenched in sweat, feeling a mix of exhaustion and virtue. He had done his part. He had paid his dues. He had burned, according to his fitness tracker, 400 calories. He felt like he'd conquered a mountain, but in the grand scheme of his body's energy budget, he had barely made a dent. Here's the brutal mathematical truth that the fitness industry doesn't put on its posters. That 400-calorie run, an immense effort for someone carrying Aries weight, can be completely erased in less than 2 minutes. A single slice of pepperoni pizza? Gone. A large vanilla latte? Gone. A couple of handfuls of potato chips? Gone. He was waging an all-out war with a teaspoon, trying to empty an ocean of caloric surplus. It was a fundamentally broken strategy, but it's even worse than that. It's not just that the math is discouraging. It's that our bodies are actively working against this strategy. We are the descendants of ancestors who survived famine and scarcity. Our DNA is hardwired with one primary directive: conserve energy. When you start engaging in intense, calorie-burning exercise, your ancient biology doesn't see a Beachbody goal. It sees a threat. It senses a famine. And it initiates a series of clever, powerful countermeasures to stop you from losing precious energy. First, there's metabolic compensation. Your body is a master of efficiency. When you burn a significant number of calories through a formal workout, your body often compensates by subtly reducing the energy you expend the rest of the day. You might fidget less. You might feel more inclined to take the elevator instead of the stairs. You might talk with your hands less. These tiny, unconscious adjustments, known as a reduction in non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, can add up, clawing back a surprising percentage of the calories you thought you burned. Second, and far more powerful, is appetite compensation. That grueling run didn't just burn calories. It sent a screaming signal to his brain's hunger center. His body, sensing an energy deficit, flooded his system with ghrelin, the hunger hormone. The result was a ravenous, primal hunger that was nearly impossible to ignore. After a workout, he didn't just feel hungry. He felt entitled. He had suffered, so now he deserved a reward. That healthy salad suddenly looked a lot better with extra dressing, cheese, and croutons. Or maybe he'd just have a small burger because he earned it. His biology was tricking his psychology into undoing all his hard work, and he didn't even see it happening. This is the hamster wheel. You run and run, creating a small deficit. Your body responds by slowing down and ramping up hunger. You eat back the calories, often more than you burned. You feel frustrated that the scale isn't moving, so you think the solution is to run even harder. The cycle repeats, spiraling into exhaustion, injury, and a profound sense of failure. Ari was living this reality every single day. When Xiaomanyc analyzed this, he saw the core problem wasn't Ari's lack of effort, but his misapplication of it. The strategy had to be flipped entirely. He introduced Ari to a new paradigm, a fundamental reframing of the purpose of movement. He told him, "We will no longer exercise to lose weight. From now on, we eat to lose weight and we exercise for our health." This was a seismic shift. It decoupled the act of moving from the act of eating. Exercise was no longer a punishment for caloric indulgence. It was a celebration of what his body could do. And the type of exercise changed dramatically. The punishing, high-impact, appetite-spiking cardio was out. In its place were two far more powerful, sustainable, and effective forms of movement. The first was walking. Simple, boring, unsexy walking. Ari was instructed to walk every single day. Not for a set amount of time, not to hit a certain heart rate, but to simply move. He walked to the grocery store. He walked while taking phone calls. He took long, meandering walks in the evening listening to podcasts. This wasn't a workout. This was just living. But this low-intensity, steady-state movement is a fat loss superpower. Primarily uses fat for fuel, it doesn't spike cortisol or hunger hormones, it's easy on the joints, and it massively increases that NEAT, the daily calorie burn, that his body was previously shutting down. He was burning hundreds of extra calories a day without even feeling like he was exercising. The second pillar was resistance training. Xiaomanyc knew that the ultimate goal wasn't just to make Ari a smaller version of himself. It was to change his entire body composition. Endless cardio can burn both fat and muscle, leaving you skinny fat, with a slower metabolism than when you started. Building muscle does the opposite. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. The more muscle you have on your frame, the more calories your body burns 24 hours a day, even when you're sleeping. It's like upgrading your body's engine from a 4-cylinder to a V8. Ari didn't start by trying to lift heroic amounts of weight. He started with the basics: squats, push-ups, rows. The goal wasn't to annihilate himself in the gym. It was to send a consistent signal to his body to build and maintain muscle. As he got stronger, the weight on the bar increased. And with every new pound of muscle he built, his resting metabolic rate, the number of calories he burned just to exist, ticked a little bit higher. He was turning his body into a fat-burning furnace. A furnace that stayed lit long after his workout was over. The psychological impact of this shift was profound. He stopped dreading his workouts. The long walks became his time for mental clarity, a form of active meditation. The strength training sessions became a source of empowerment. Watching the numbers on the dumbbells go up was more motivating than watching the number on the scale go down. He was no longer focused on shrinking his body but on building it. He was becoming stronger, more capable, more resilient. Think of it this way. Imagine your body as a company. For a long time, diet and exercise were seen as equal partners in the quest for profit or fat loss. But the Xiaomanyc method reveals a more accurate corporate structure. Your diet is the CEO. It makes the big strategic decisions that determine profit or loss. It has the final say on whether you are in a deficit or a surplus. Exercise is the fantastic head of HR. It's vital for long-term health, morale, strength, and preventing burnout. A great HR department makes the entire company better, stronger, and more resilient. But the HR department doesn't drive revenue. You cannot make a failing company profitable by only focusing on HR. Ari had been trying to make his HR department run the entire company. Now, with his CEO, his diet firmly in charge of creating the calorie deficit, his new HR department walking in strength training, was free to do what it does best: build a stronger, healthier, more efficient corporate machine from the inside out. He had finally escaped the hamster wheel. But even with the right food and the right exercise plan in place, there was one more piece of the puzzle, an invisible architecture of failure that had been built all around him, silently sabotaging his every move. He had to learn to see it before he could tear it down. This architecture isn't made of brick and mortar. It's built from habits, routines, and the subtle cues in our daily lives. It's the layout of your kitchen. It's the friends you hang out with on a Friday night. It's the apps on your phone and the thoughts that fire automatically in your brain when you feel stressed or bored. James Clear, in his masterpiece Atomic Habits, puts it perfectly. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Ari had a goal, a big one, but his system, his entire life's operating system, was a finely tuned machine designed for failure. His willpower, no matter how strong on a good day, stood no chance against an environment that was constantly, relentlessly pushing him in the wrong direction. The first step wasn't another workout. It was an audit. Ari and Xiaomanyc walked into the one place where most of our food decisions are made, the kitchen. And what they found was a perfect case study in environmental sabotage. On the counter, a bowl not of fruit, but of candy and snack-sized chip bags, placed there for guests. But really for Ari himself, opening the fridge was like opening a treasure chest of temptation. Sugary sodas and juices were at eye level the first thing you see. Leftover pizza was in a clear container, front and center. Tucked away in the crisper drawer, almost hidden in shame, was a bag of spinach, slowly turning to green slime. A forgotten relic of a past attempt at health. The pantry was worse. It was a library of processed foods. Boxes of sugary cereal, sleeves of cookies, instant noodles, microwave popcorn. These weren't just food items, they were solutions. Quick solutions for hunger, for boredom, for stress. The path of least resistance in Ari's kitchen didn't lead to a healthy, home-cooked meal. That would require finding a recipe, chopping vegetables, cooking, and then cleaning. The path of least resistance, the one your tired brain will always choose after a long day, led directly to a 700-calorie bag of chips that could be opened in 3 seconds. His kitchen wasn't a place of nourishment. It was a minefield. So they began the teardown. Not with a sledgehammer but with a trash bag. This was the Great Purge. Together they went through every shelf, every drawer. They read labels. Anything with high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, or a list of ingredients they couldn't pronounce. Gone. The candy, the cookies, the sodas, the instant meals. It all went. For many people this feels wasteful. Feels like throwing money away. But Xiaomanyc reframed it for Ari. He wasn't throwing away food. He was throwing away the tools of his own self-destruction. He was buying back his health. The cost of that junk food was not the $5 on the price tag. It was his future. Once the space was cleared, they rebuilt it. They didn't just remove the bad. They strategically engineered the good. They went grocery shopping with a list and a purpose. Fresh fruit was washed, dried, and placed in a beautiful bowl right in the middle of the counter, replacing the candy. Water bottles were filled and put on the top shelf of the fridge at eye level. Healthy snacks like Greek yogurt, hummus, and pre-cut vegetables were placed front and center. They pre-cooked chicken breast and quinoa and put them in clear containers, making a healthy meal just as easy to grab as the old leftover pizza. They altered the environment to make the right decision the easy decision. They didn't add friction to the bad habits. They removed the bad habits entirely and made the good habits frictionless. But the physical environment was only one wall of this invisible prison. The next was social. Think about your own life. When you want to celebrate, what do you do? When you want to catch up with a friend, where do you go? For Ari, and for most of us, the answer usually involves food and alcohol. His social life was a revolving door of pizza nights, happy hours, and barbecues. His friends and family, with the best intentions in the world, were his unwitting saboteurs. The just one bite won't hurt comments. The you're no fun anymore jokes. The loving grandmother who shows affection by insisting you have a second slice of pie. These are powerful social forces that are incredibly difficult to resist. Saying no doesn't just feel like you're rejecting the food. It feels like you're rejecting the person offering it, rejecting the social ritual itself. Ari's choice wasn't just between a salad and a burger. It was between fitting in and being an outcast. So Xiaomanyc helped him rewrite the social scripts. It wasn't about getting new friends. It was about introducing new activities with his current ones. Instead of let's grab a beer, Ari started suggesting, let's go shoot some hoops, or let's check out that new hiking trail. He was changing the context of his relationships from being centered around consumption to being centered around shared experiences. For the situations he couldn't change, like a family birthday party, he prepared. He would eat a healthy, filling meal before he went, so he wasn't starving and tempted by everything on the table. He learned to say, no thank you, I'm full, but it looks amazing, with a genuine smile. He was taking control of his social environment, rather than letting it control him. Then came the third wall, the one we all carry in our pockets. The digital environment. Ari's phone was a 24/7 temptation machine. Push notifications from DoorDash and Uber Eats advertised deals on his favorite junk food. His Instagram feed was a curated stream of glistening cheeseburgers and decadent desserts. The YouTube algorithm, knowing he'd watched food challenges in the past, kept recommending videos that glorified binge eating. Every time he unlocked his phone, he was bombarded with cues that triggered his old cravings. The solution here was just as systematic. First, a digital purge. He deleted every single food delivery app from his phone. The tiny bit of friction of having to re-download the app, sign in, and enter his credit card info was often enough to stop an impulsive order in its tracks. He then went on a digital diet. He unfollowed every food porn account on Instagram. He started aggressively telling YouTube, "Do not recommend channel," on any junk food-related content. Then he did the opposite. He started following fitness athletes, healthy chefs, and motivational accounts. He subscribed to channels that taught him how to cook simple, delicious, healthy meals. He was actively curating his information intake. Within weeks, the algorithm got the message. His phone, once a source of temptation, had transformed into a source of inspiration. The physical, social, and digital walls had been torn down and rebuilt. But the final piece of the architecture was the most ingrained and the most important: his mental environment. The automatic thought patterns and emotional triggers that had been running his life for years. The trigger routine reward loop was deeply embedded. The trigger might be stress from work. The routine was to order a large pizza and eat the whole thing. The reward was a temporary flood of dopamine that numbed the stress. To break this, he couldn't just eliminate the trigger. Stress is a part of life. He had to replace the routine. This required a new level of self-awareness. Xiaomanyc had him practice a simple technique. Whenever a powerful craving hit, he was to stop and ask himself one question. What am I actually feeling right now? Was it true hunger? Or was it boredom, anxiety, loneliness? By simply pausing and identifying the emotion, he created a small gap between the trigger and his automatic routine. In that gap, he could make a conscious choice. If he was stressed, the new plan was to immediately put on his shoes and go for a brisk 20-minute walk. If he was bored, he would call a friend or work on a hobby. He was systematically installing new, healthier routines to deal with his emotional triggers. The reward was different. It wasn't the instant, numbing bliss of a food coma, but the slow-burn satisfaction of an endorphin rush, the pride of staying on track, the feeling of being in control. Piece by piece, Ari was dismantling the invisible architecture of failure and building a new architecture of success. The right choices became the easy, automatic choices. His world was no longer a constant battle against temptation. Instead, his surroundings, physical, social, digital, and mental, were now guiding him, supporting him, and pushing him towards his goal. He had successfully rebuilt his world from the ground up. The system was finally in place. But a system is only as strong as the person running it. The final, most difficult battle wasn't in the kitchen or the gym. It was in the mirror. He had changed what he did, but he hadn't yet changed who he was. This is the paradox of transformation. You can change everything on the outside, your diet, your routine, your schedule, but if the person in the mirror still sees the old you will eventually claw its way back to the surface. Arya was living the life of a fit person, but he still saw himself as a fat man playing a role. Every healthy choice felt like a performance, a temporary act. And every night, he went to bed terrified that the next day, the curtain would fall, the applause would stop, and he'd be back where he started because that's who he really was. He was the guy who quits, the guy who fails, the guy who takes the easy way out. This internal narrative was the ghost in the machine, the saboteur in his own mind, waiting for a moment of weakness to whisper, "See? I told you so. This isn't you." The breakthrough, the final piece of the puzzle, didn't come from a fitness guru or a diet book. It came, strangely enough, from rewatching Xiaomanyc's videos, but this time with a different lens. He wasn't just watching a guy speak languages anymore. He was watching a fundamental identity shift happen in real time. Xiaomanyc doesn't just say a few phrases in Mandarin. He walks into that restaurant and, for those 5 minutes, he becomes a participant in that culture. He's not an American pretending to speak Chinese. He embodies the curiosity, the humility, and the confidence of a genuine language learner. He isn't acting like someone who speaks the language. He is someone who speaks the language. The action follows the identity, and that was it. That was the secret. Arya had been trying to force a new set of actions onto an old identity. It was like trying to run brand new software on an ancient, incompatible operating system. It was destined to crash. He had to stop being a fat guy on a diet. The very phrase implies a temporary state of suffering. A diet is something you endure until you can go back to normal. He had to stop that. He had to become, in his core, a healthy, athletic person. The goal wasn't to lose 100 pounds. The goal was to become the kind of person who weighs 100 pounds less. This shift from action-based goals to identity-based goals changed everything. It reframed the entire journey. He began a conscious process of rewriting his own internal monologue. "I have to go to the gym" became, "I'm the kind of person who never misses a workout." The first is a chore. The second is an affirmation of identity. "I can't eat that pizza" became, "I don't eat that kind of food." The first implies deprivation and restriction, a rule being forced upon you. The second is a simple statement of fact about who you are, a choice you are making freely because it aligns with your identity. It's the difference between saying, "I'm trying to quit smoking," and "I'm not a smoker." One is a struggle against your nature, the other is your nature. Every single action he took from that point forward was recontextualized. It was no longer just a task on a to-do list. It was a vote. Every healthy meal he prepped wasn't just lunch for Tuesday. It was a vote cast for, "I am a person who respects my body." Every grueling workout wasn't just burning calories. It was a vote cast for, "I am an athlete." Every time he walked past the donut aisle, it was a vote for, "I am disciplined." One vote doesn't decide an election, but hundreds, then thousands of them, they create a landslide. The evidence starts to pile up, becoming undeniable. The reflection in the mirror begins to argue back against the old negative voice. The new identity wasn't built on wishful thinking or empty affirmations. It was built on a mountain of irrefutable proof. He was simply becoming what he was already doing. His system, the one he had so carefully constructed, was no longer just a set of life hacks. It was an identity reinforcement machine. His kitchen, filled with healthy food, was what a healthy person's kitchen looks like. The gym bag permanently in his car was what a fit person's car contains. The water bottle on his desk was what a hydrated, energetic person keeps nearby. His environment was constantly whispering to him, reminding him of who he had decided to be. It made being that person the path of least resistance. The tipping point wasn't a single moment. It was a slow, quiet sunrise. It was the day he realized he had gone an entire week without a single craving for junk food. Not because he was resisting, but because the thought simply hadn't occurred to him. It was the moment a colleague asked him for fitness advice, and he answered with genuine confidence, not feeling like a fraud. It was the day he tried on an old pair of pants for a laugh and found that he could fit both of his legs into one of the pant legs. In that moment, looking at the ridiculous amount of empty space, the ghost of the old Arya didn't just feel distant. It felt like a different person entirely, a character from a story he once read. The battle wasn't over because he had won. It was over because the enemy had deserted the field. There was no one left to fight. The final result was a weight loss of 124 pounds. But to focus on that number is to miss the entire point. The weight loss was just a byproduct, a symptom of the real change. The real transformation was invisible. He hadn't just changed his body. He had upgraded his operating system. He had forged a new identity, one built on discipline, resilience, and self-respect. He learned that the ultimate form of motivation isn't a reward or a punishment, but the desire to live up to your own self-image. So, when we analyze the Xiaomanyc method, we see it's not about language and it's not even just about weight loss. It's a universal blueprint for profound personal change. And it breaks down into 4 distinct, powerful stages. First, the shocking start. The gringo moment. You need a reason so powerful it makes inaction impossible. For Arya, it was the doctor's grim prognosis. For you, it might be a reflection in a window, a comment from a loved one, or simply the quiet, gnawing realization that you are meant for more. You have to find the moment that flips the switch from, "I should" to, "I must." Second, one word at a time. The micro habit. You don't aim for fluency on day 1. You aim for hello. Arya didn't start with marathon training. He started by walking to the end of his driveway. The goal is to make the initial action so laughably easy that you can't say no. Build momentum. Win the first smallest battle, then the next. Third, build the system. The language environment. A language learner surrounds themselves with the language. You must surround yourself with your goal. Arya engineered his environment to make healthy choices automatic and unhealthy choices a pain. Design your world so that your willpower is the last line of defense, not the first. Make your desired future the default setting. And finally, the most crucial step, become the native speaker. The identity shift. Stop being a tourist in the land of your goals. Move in. Don't just do the habits of the person you want to be, become that person. Start casting votes for your new identity with every small choice. Let your actions build the evidence until your belief in your new self is unshakable. Because changing your habits is powerful, but changing your identity is permanent. Arya's story is proof that the person you are today does not have to be the person you are tomorrow. The chains of our past habits are only as strong as our belief in them. His journey started with a simple, almost childish idea. What if he approached losing weight the same way a YouTuber learned languages? It ended with a complete reinvention of the man himself. And it leaves us with the most powerful question of all. Who do you want to vote to become today?